Jiraiya was about to die, and he knew it. But his biggest fear wasn't the 6 paths of pain. No, his biggest fear was that his greatest secret would die with him. The legendary Sannin, Naruto's master, was right there, cornered in the Hidden Rain village, surrounded by enemies, and death itself was already knocking on his door, knocking hard. And the worst part was that he wasn't thinking about any battle strategy. He wasn't thinking about how to escape that hell. You know, his mind could only focus on one single image, one single person, and that person was the Leaf's Hokage, the woman he secretly loved his entire life, and that love was the biggest mystery he carried inside him, more dangerous than any forbidden jutsu he had ever seen. And there, at that critical moment, Jiraiya realized that his most important mission wasn't investigating the Akatsuki and finding out the truth about their leader. His life's most important mission was to confess everything he felt, everything he had hidden for decades and decades under that mask of a pervert, of a writer of improper books. It was all a facade, a lie he invented to hide the overwhelming truth that he would give his life 1,000 times over just to see Tsunade truly smile. Because he always knew that this love would never happen, that he would never be good enough for her. That pain was worse than any black chakra receiver stake that was driven in his back right now. It was then that he decided to use a technique that no ninja in the world had the courage to use, and it was a jutsu that didn't kill enemies, didn't destroy villages, but it was something much more sinister and profound. And he bit his finger hard and the blood flowed, and with trembling hands he began to make the signs, and each sign was a memory of her, and he was concentrating all the rest of his chakra, not to fight, but to create a special scroll, a scroll that couldn't be destroyed by anything in the world, and this scroll would keep his last will, his final declaration, and he was putting the very essence of his soul right there, and all the love he held onto for so many years, not knowing if it would ever reach her hands. But the secret of this technique was that it was a time jutsu, and that it would only activate if the user died. And that was the final and most cruel condition of all, and the scroll would be sealed and remain blank until Jiraiya's chakra disappeared from the world, and only then the message would appear, written in blood, revealing every dark secret of his heart. And that was the most poetic and tragic thing, and he was betting everything on that small piece of paper, because it was the only way for Tsunade to know the truth about him, and know that everything he did was for her, even going on that suicide mission, because deep down he wanted to prove his worth to the only woman he truly loved in his life. And while he wrote the words, he never had the courage to say, cold sweat mixed with blood ran down his face, and he stopped every second to breathe, and time was running out, and he knew pain's paths were already coming down, and he felt their presence approaching, and his heart pounded with fear, but not fear of dying, man. His fear was that the scroll wouldn't make it in time, and that Tsunade would never know that at the end of everything, in the last beats of his heart, the name he screamed wasn't his own and not Naruto's. The name he screamed in silence was hers, and that was the only thing that mattered now. He rolled up the scroll with the last strength he had left and tied it to his leg, and he looked at the gray sky of the Hidden Rain village and gave a weak smile, a smile of acceptance, because he knew his journey was ending, and he called a small and discreet messenger toad, and he handed the scroll to the toad and said with a weak and almost inaudible voice, "Take this to her, no matter the cost." And the toad looked at him with sadness, but nodded and disappeared in smoke, taking with it Jiraiya's last hope that his love would not be in vain. And at the exact moment the toad disappeared, the hideout door exploded and the 6 paths of pain entered, with their Rinnegan eyes shining in hate and destruction. And Jiraiya stood up with difficulty, ready for his final battle, and he knew he had no chance of surviving. But he was at peace, because he had done what needed to be done, and he looked at Pain and said with a defiant smile, "Get ready, because Master Jiraiya still has one last lesson to give." But deep down, his heart was with Tsunade, and he knew that if this scroll didn't arrive, his death would be the greatest tragedy of his life, and he was ready to give his last breath for her. The fight started in the blink of an eye, and the main Pain didn't even attack Jiraiya first. No, check this out. He aimed straight for the little toad that was escaping because he noticed the strong chakra trail there and launched a black chakra missile striking the toad's arm, which fell dazed in the water far below. Jiraiya, seeing that scene, felt his world collapse, and he screamed desperate, jumping towards the toad. But 3 other Pain bodies cut off his path with brutal attacks, and the Sannin had to dodge by instinct, because if he took that hit he would die right there without a chance to fight. He fought like a demon and used powerful summoning and barrier jutsus, but the Rinnegan saw everything and neutralized everything, and time was passing, and Jiraiya looked down and saw the toad floating and drowning with the scroll of death still stuck to its little leg, almost disappearing into the darkness. And there Jiraiya understood the cruel plan of the Akatsuki leader, because Pain didn't just want to kill him, man. He wanted to erase Jiraiya's existence and destroy everything he loved, and Tsunade's secret was the main target now, and that realization was like a stab in the chest worse than any black receiver stake. With his last strength, and using Sage Mode to the limit, he conjured an immense swamp of the underworld barrier to trap the Pains, and in a final burst and one last sprint, he jumped into the water in a suicide dive, looking for the injured little toad that was already submerged fighting for life. He touched the toad in the cold water and felt the scroll, but its little leg was broken, and it let go, and with the impact of the fight up above, the scroll slipped from Jiraiya's trembling hand and fell straight into the deep and icy abyss under Amegakure, where the light never reached and no one ever returned. Dude, the legendary Sannin screamed there underwater, and no sound came out, but the pain in his soul was so great that he stopped fighting and let Sage Mode fail, because the only thing that mattered to him now, his last will, had just been swallowed by the deep darkness of that icy sea. Without strength, and with a broken heart, Jiraiya was pulled up by the 6 paths of pain who surrounded him in the water, and he didn't resist anymore, and the black spikes were crowvad in his back again, but he didn't even feel the physical pain anymore, because the pain of losing his last confession to Tsunade was unbearable and overwhelming. He looked at the sky and saw the rain fall mixed with his tears, and he knew there was no going back, and accepted death, but not as a hero of Konoha. He accepted death as the biggest failure that ever lived, because he didn't protect the information, and worst of all, he didn't protect his forbidden love. In his mind, he asked forgiveness for Naruto, but mainly he asked forgiveness from her, and the image of the Hokage's smile appeared, and he thought he would never see that face again, and that was his last memory, before his consciousness began to fail and his world went completely black. Pain, seeing Jiraiya immobile and dying, considered the mission accomplished and disappeared into the shadows of the Rain Village, and deathly silence took over the place, and down below, very deep, the immortal scroll sank nonstop, carrying the greatest secret of the ninja world to a grave of ice and absolute darkness. It seemed like the end and total tragedy, dude. But Jiraiya's time jutsu was more complex than the Rinnegan could imagine, because down in the depths of the icy sea, the scroll didn't get wet, didn't tear, and the seal began to glow with a mysterious red light, and a bizarre and hidden force began to pull that small piece of paper in a direction that would change the destiny of everyone in Konoha forever. Months dragged by in Konoha, and the pain of losing Jiraiya was still alive and bleeding in everyone's chest, you know, but no one felt this pain more than Tsunade herself. And she was at the limit, man, at the absolute limit of her sanity, because guilt corroded her soul every single day. It was a cold night, and she was on the balcony of the Hokage building, drinking bottle after bottle of sake, trying to drown the memories and the image of his last smile on departure. And she looked at the moon and wondered why on earth she hadn't stopped him from going on that suicide mission to the Rain Village. Her face, that always looked young and strong because of medical ninjutsu, now showed signs of extreme exhaustion, and the deep dark circles betrayed the nights without sleep, and she was trembling, man, not from cold, but from an anguish that no jutsu in the world could heal, and loneliness was her only companion there. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a small trail of white smoke appeared on the balcony railing, and she was startled and almost dropped the bottle, because that type of summoning was very specific, and her heart stopped for a second, and a terrible chill ran up her spine, a feeling of macabre déjà vu. When the smoke cleared, she saw a tiny little toad, and it was in a terrible state, man, with dry and burnt skin, and it seemed to have fought against all forces of nature to get there. And the little creature looked at her with tired and sad eyes, and coughed up some salt water before collapsing on the ground. Tsunade ran and picked up the toad in her hand gently, and she noticed there was something tied to its broken little leg, and it was a small leather cylinder totally worn out and covered in salt and sea mud, and she recognized the sealing pattern instantly, and her world spun dizzily, because it was Jiraiya's personal seal. She used medical ninjutsu to stabilize the little toad, and with trembling hands and her heart beating in her throat, she untied the cylinder and opened it, and inside was the scroll, and it was damp and smelled of death and deep darkness, and it looked like it had been chewed by some abyssal creature, but it was there whole. The emotion was so strong that she fell to her knees on the balcony, and the sake was forgotten on the floor, and she cried desperate and without control, because that was a message from beyond, and it was physical proof that he thought of her until the last second, and she couldn't even breathe properly with the impact of that bombshell revelation. She tried to open the scroll, but it was sealed with a blood and time jutsu, and she knew that only her blood or the end of his chakra could open that. And since he was already gone, she bit her own finger hard and swiped the blood on the red seal, which began to glow intensely with a warm and nostalgic light. The scroll unrolled slowly in front of her, and Tsunade held back tears, hoping to see a map or a clue about Pain or any crucial military information for the village. But what she saw there, man, changed everything she thought about the man she knew her whole life and left her completely paralyzed with shock. The paper had no maps and had no codes, and in fact the scrolls seemed to be blank, but the red light of the seal continued to glow and emanate an absurdly strong spiritual energy, and Tsunade felt a familiar presence right there beside her, and the temperature on the balcony rose suddenly, as if someone was hugging her from behind. She looked at the blank paper again, and her tears fell on the damp surface, and that was when a magic happened, man, because where the tear touched the paper, a clumsy and familiar handwriting began to appear, not written in ink, but formed by pure chakra, and the first sentence that arose on the sheet made Tsunade's heart stop beating for good. Tsunade read that first line, and her world collapsed again, but in a different way, and the letters formed by chakra said, "Tsunade, if you were reading this, it's because I finally had the courage," and she couldn't read anything else because tears blurred everything, and her heart felt like it was going to pop out of her mouth, man. And suddenly the scroll stopped glowing and the handwriting disappeared, but the spiritual energy there on the balcony became absurdly strong and dense, and the air got hot. And Tsunade looked to the side, and she almost fainted from shock and emotion because she saw a familiar silhouette forming right there in front of her, and it was a pure projection of chakra. It wasn't Edo Tensei, and not an illusion, man. It was Jiraiya himself, but he was young and handsome without the battle marks and without the mortal wounds, and he was wearing that classic outfit of his, and he smiled at her with that stupid and sincere smile she knew so well, and that she missed so much deep in her soul. Tsunade tried to touch him, but her hand went right through, because he was just energy, and he looked into her eyes with a love so deep she had never seen before, and the projection began to speak, and his voice echoed in her mind, not in the surroundings, and it was the calm voice of the Jiraiya from the old days of youth. He said, "I might not have time to tell you in person, but I always loved you. In every book I wrote, every stupid joke, every peak of the hot springs, it was all a ridiculous excuse to try to deal with the fact that I would never be good enough for you, and that was my biggest mistake and my biggest truth." The Leaf's Hokage, the strongest woman in the world, was there crying like a child, and she tried to speak, but the voice wouldn't come out, and she could only shake her head, and he continued, "I know it's late, but I needed you to know that in my last breath in the cold water, I only thought of your face, and that gave me peace to depart." Jiraiya's projection began to flicker and get weak because his chakra was running out, and he approached her and made the gesture of caressing her face even without being able to touch, and he said the final sentence that broke Tsunade into 1,000 pieces, "Thank you for being the reason for my lifetime goodbye," and he smiled one last time. And in the blink of an eye, his image exploded into small blue lights that floated in the air and slowly disappeared into the darkness of Konoha's night, and the scroll in her hands caught fire on its own and turned into white ashes, and there was no physical proof of that moment left, but her soul was filled, man. Tsunade stood there looking at nothing with her face bathed in tears, but the weight in her chest was gone, and she finally understood that their love was never impossible because it always existed in the silence. And between the lines of the life they lived together, she gave a weak but hopeful smile looking at the moon. And so the story of this epic and tragic love finally had its complete full stop, and without leaving any doubt, and Master Jiraiya rested in peace knowing that she knew the truth and love conquered death, man. And you need to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more insane stories like this one, because there's another heavy video waiting for you. Click there, and I'm out.